Welcome back. So last time we were all talking together, we collected some soil. So this is the soil sample that I collected, took notes on. And now we're going to go into how to plate soil from this dried up sample. And so what we need to do, of course, is we're going to assume something. There's about 100 trillion bacteria per gram of soil in this tube. And so if we tried to plate this directly on the plate, we would get literally a lawn of bacterial colonies. And that's not what we want to study it. We want to be able to see single colonies. So in order to assist us in our efforts to get single colonies, what we're going to have to do is dilute down the amount of soil that we have. And we're going to do this through a process known as serial dilutions. Now, in order to do this, of course, we're going to need a few items. We're going to need some water. So this is regular water that we have here. We're going to need some test tubes. This is going to be where we put our initial amount of soil to mix it in some water. And then we're going to need these smaller 1.5 milliliter tubes to do dilutions in. And so, as all good scientists know, before you ever start to do an experiment, it's very important to label all of your tubes. And so this first tube is going to have a mark on it. That's going to be what we call the 9 milliliter mark. That's how much water you need to put in this initial tube. And of course, everything that you touch in here, so that we can follow who the sample came from, has to have your name or initials. So I'm going to put my initials, the nature of the sample, which is going to be soil, and the date that I'm putting it in here so that I can figure out when this was first made. Okay? Once you have that labeled, you're going to label these smaller tubes. Okay? Now, when we're thinking about how we're going to do this in a stepwise progression, we're going to have 9 mils of water in this tube plus 1 gram of soil. And we're going to go and weigh the soil here in a little bit, but we want to make sure that we have the water in here first. And so when I put 1 gram of soil into 9 mils of water, that's going to give me a total of 10 mils of solution. What I'm going to do then is to make a tenfold dilution, to dilute it by tenfold. I'm going to put 1 mil of water in here and subtract 100 microliters. So what we end up with is 0.9 mils. And what we're going to do then is we're going to take 100 microliters or 0.1 milliliters of this solution and put it into here. So note that if we put 0.1 mils of the solution into 0.9 mils here, our new total is again 1 mil. And so that would be a tenfold dilution. So I'm going to do that a few times. So I'm going to take 0.1 milliliters of this solution, transfer it to this next tube that has 0.9 mils of water. So again, the dilution series is 1 over total. So notice again, 0.1 plus 0.9 equals 1. And we're going to do that all the way through. Here I chose 4 tubes to do 4 dilutions. So this first tube will be the 10-fold dilution. This will be 100-fold. This will be 1,000-fold. And this will be 10,000 times diluted. And so that will enable us to see the amount of colonies that we get. You can go further, you can go less. It's all up to you on how you determine this. But I'm going to go ahead and label all of my tubes so that I know which tube has which dilution of soil. Okay, once I'm done with that, we're going to go ahead and fill up our tubes with water. Okay, you can either use a pipette to do this, or if you're very careful, you can just pour directly. It turns out I'm not very careful with this, so I'm just going to go ahead and pipette directly. You simply put it in, suck up the water, and fill it until you get to that line. When you get very close to that line, you can go slowly. You just want to be as accurate as possible. Okay, so that's done. Now, the great thing about these smaller tubes is that these tubes have hash marks on here. So it's going to probably be very, very tough to see on the camera, but that 1.0 mark is where you want to fill it to. Okay? And so once you're ready, you simply, very carefully again, fill it to that 1.0 line. Now you might be wondering, well, Angelo, hold on, you just said that we have to fill this to 0.9, and you just filled that one to 1 mil. Well, that's where these handy dandy smaller pipettes come in. Note that this is set at 100 microliters, and remember, that's 0.1 mils. And so once you have this filled to 1 mil, you simply take this, push down the plunger, and suck out 0.1 mils. Now you have 0.9 mils left in here. And you're going to do that for the rest of this series. So now that our sample is ready to go and our dilutions are made, now we're ready to weigh out our soil. Now remember, we're going to need approximately 1 gram of soil in order to continue. And so, of course, we have to weigh. So this right here is a very fancy, what we call microscale. It measures in very, very minute amounts. It can go all the way down to micrograms, but we're going to measure in grams right now. So to use this machine, you're simply going to open up these glass doors, and you're going to take a piece of computer paper that you've ripped in half and folded kind of into a small boat, and you're going to put it into here. Now note that this actually weighs a certain amount of grams. And so what we want to do is kind of zero this out so we can know what the exact weight of our soil is. So you simply press this button that says OT, that means tare, and it will reset the value here to 0 after a little bit of waiting. Ready, after it says around 0, to add our soil. So again, you simply scoop some out and lightly tap onto this piece of paper. You might need to force it out a little bit if it's especially a wet sample. So that's about 0.6. Needs a little bit more. Okay, so that's a little bit too much, so then we simply scoop some up. And note how now we're right around 1. It doesn't have to be 100% exact, you just want to be around 1 gram. Now once you have this 1 gram in here, you're going to add this to your previously filled 9 mil tube. Okay, and so any way you can get that soil in, you can press it in, and again, we want to get as much as we can here. Once you got that pretty well situated inside this tube, now it's time to mix. So you really want to shake it up a lot. You want to make sure it's nice and diluted. We have this machine right here called a vortexer, where you can push down your tube, and it creates kind of a tornado inside the tube to make sure that we are nice and mixed. So you hold it down for about 10 seconds. That's going to be very, very sufficient for mixing. And now we will take this back to our desk. So now that we have our very well mixed soil and water, we can start diluting it. So remember, we're going to take 100 microliters of this solution and put it into this next tube. And remember, all these dilution tubes should have 0.9 milliliters at this point. So we open up our tube, and again we push down the plunger and we suck out 100 microliters. And we open up this tube and add that to it. And we want to make sure that we're very, very well mixed. And so you can just simply push the plunger up and down very gently, and that's going to mix it up. Okay? Now remember, the total volume in here is 1 mil. Now to do another dilution, we simply take, again, 100 microliters off the top there that we've very well mixed and put it into our next tube. And so notice that's another 10-fold dilution. And you can very much tell the difference in color here. You can see how this one's a little bit more foggy, whereas this one's a little bit more clear. Now trust me when I say there's tons of bacteria still in there. So again, you're going to do this as many times as you set up dilution tubes for. Again, suck out, move it to your next tube that has 0.9 milliliters, and again, your new total is 1. And I'm mixing ever so gently. And then you're going to take this one and put it into your last one. And now we are ready to play out our dilutions.